Alright. So I need some fake data I can shove into this thing. So fetch initial data. We are going to need the stage result information. So we're going to need stats. So we need an event for our current stage I think it's inside the player state. Is that it? Or is it inside the game state? I think it's the player state that has these data structures that we actually care about. No, we're looking for player state, not game state. Get mission stats. Mission stats. Do we have our stage stats? We don't have stage stats. We just have F mission stat data. We have user stats, so user stats are what we need. So this is going to be current stage stats updated. So we'll have a user stats there, and we'll also have a current mission stats updated. With the user stats in it as well, and we'll take both of them. We'll also need a fetch call in here, won't we? Alright, so let's generate that guy. So if we go to our game utils, we're going to need current stage stats, and we'll need Get current mission stats as well. So the question is, if we look through our project, do we ever actually use our fuser stats? So we have a fill user stat from context, names, and values. So we're going to need online and offline stats. Alright, so in our Dashkin game data, we're going to need a function here that takes f-Dashkin mission stats and returns something else. Returns our f-user stats. Just a lot more data munging. Basically, I've got all these stats in one format. I need to put them in another so that I can actually use them. That's just how all this shit works. Is we just need transmooglers all over the place. Alright, so let's see, is this inside of gameplay stats? Yeah, it's gameplay stats.wins. Wait, it's ball touches.touches. We got slide hits. Low hits. High hits. This is what ground pound. Ground hits. Ground pound air hits. This will be defend hits, yeah. And this will be player touches. High hits. I got defend hits. I got wall hits, which is on gameplay stats. Alright, we got matches played. We don't even have wins in a row. So we need to add that to our gameplay stats. Alright, on wins, we do plus plus gameplay stats dot win in row. Gameplay stats. We'll set loss in row to 0. So I need the player state checked out. Okay, so that should set those guys. Alright, so when in row. Loss in row. Score, I just don't even know. We don't even have this. So win loss is just going to be 0. Win score is 0. Accuracy is going to be. That's bullshit. Accuracy exists. Sorry, to prevent the camera from going below, like a rail that is at a lowest border? I'm not sure what you mean. You mean in the game? Like, I mean, I'm assuming you're asking because of something else. But no, there's no rail there for the camera. I mean, there's always a way to prevent the camera from going below the terrain or something like that, but that doesn't mean that is implemented or exists. It absolutely does not exist. And I'd assume you're asking because Adam's having trouble with something with keeping the camera in the right place, in which case I just tell him to fucking deal with it. Because the implications of a system that needs to exist to do that is much more difficult than just fixing the damned level to the art in it. The camera tends to go into the terrain because that's in front of you. Yes, the camera does not lead based on the surface normal of the thing or anything like that. And basically, if Adam's bitching about that, he needs to fucking not make a level that does that, because that's the system that we got. The systems that are required in order to actually have the camera nicely do that sort of motion are much more complicated and require much more work than just not making a level that has those sorts of things that look bad. I'm not kidding. Like, the solution is sometimes worse than the cure on some of these. Because you can make something, but then like you get sick because the camera's going up and down super fast and like all this other shit. It just doesn't work. So I'd say it's almost like I understand where you're coming from, but you need data and systems in order to actually do that. And that's what machines work off of. Don't blame it on him. And do we have a time? I mean, we're gonna need a time. It's gonna be what? Gameplay stats, level end time, minus level start time. No, no, Scott, I'm just gonna stop you there. It's not gonna work. That's You start doing that stuff, and then the camera goes up and down, and it just freaks people the fuck out. Like it's, and the camera is like doing all this lead shit and the rest of it, and it's better just to not do anything. Otherwise, it's best to have like a month of work on the camera. You know, it's like either do it and do it like gold plated, do all this shit, and everything has to be, you know, you have all these big ass systems that do it, or just don't do anything, because any middle ground is just, it doesn't fucking work. Pretty much the only fix that you can do is have like bounds for the camera that it just can't go outside of, but the camera's not even on the track, right? The camera's pulled back from the track by like 50 meters or something, so it gets even more complicated, and then you change something on the landscape at a level and you got to redo all that shit all over again. So it becomes a much bigger task and much more difficult to deal with over time. So if you're gonna do a lot of camera polish work, do it when the game is like done and the levels are ready to go, because otherwise you're just gonna be remaking camera shit forever. I need to go to my transformation utils and do that sort of stuff in here. So I need user stats here, but I need other things that come in. These things. We have mission start time, mission end time here. Alright, I need all of this. We'll see if we don't need the two little things. Alright, so call to transform things into stat objects. So we'll call transform on it, and we'll pass in stats, gameplay stats, ball touches, and player touches. And then we'll need our player state to have the same sort of thing. Well, with the camera stuff, it's basically like if you have a piece of terrain that goes like this, and your character is running along this, where do you make a rail, right? You could cast a ray from the height of the character's eye in front of it, and basically lock the camera so it's looking at a certain height. The issue comes in where you start, running up the hill, and, the camera has to raise up to do it. So if your character is running up a steep slope, the camera will tend to, basically either you're doing a ray cast in front of the player, or you're taking the middle of the camera where it is, taking that thing, casting a ray down, and placing it there. And the issue is if you have any sort of, ground that does something like that, all of a sudden when you're running over it, especially if you're running uphill, there's any sort of small variations, your camera's going to jitter, and it's gonna not appear to be a jitter, it's gonna appear to be something else. It's gonna usually appear that your character slowed down or something like that. When camera motion stuff doesn't match what you expect, usually what you assume, your brain assumes that the camera is actually correct and that the thing you're looking at is doing something odd. So a lot of visual distortion comes in there, and you think the player's movement's just fucked up. So what you have to do is you have to have a system that not only does this like middle of the camera lockdown sort of thing, it also needs to have some smoothing algorithm in there so that it doesn't, go up and down too much, too fast based on the thing. But our character's moving so fucking fast that you're going to be up and over this thing in like 2 seconds anyway. So you'd have to basically do some hand-rolled like rail system where you put some hints in the system to do that. So you're like, always do this sort of thing here so that when you run over it, it nicely follows the track. But then you go in and you go in the sculpt tool and you do something and take a chunk out of this, and then all of a sudden your rail is wrong and stuff's fucked up. So now you need tools that automatically like make the rail when you change the level and do stuff like that. So basically you need a big system to fix all that stuff and to work with any type of level. And let's say it's not even the landscape, we have a fucking rock here that's not even part of it, we need to work with that. And then how does this rail work when we have a vertical system? Does it like do this so that your rail like just jumps way the fuck up here and you jump up and the camera like freaks out and goes over? It's basically, you have to cover all the edge cases for that system to work, for it to work at all without being worse than not having the system. So it's basically, don't even start on it if you're not willing to devote lots of time to getting the camera exactly how you want it. Otherwise, deal with the crappy camera and just make levels that don't look like shit. Alright, so the other thing is we need our player state to be able to grab our current mission, our current stage data out of it. Basically, a lot of this stuff would be a lot easier if our character wasn't moving so damn fast. Because you can get away with all that easing and stuff like that if your character doesn't move like our character. Our character moves so fast that it's a mess. So I need to call the transformation utils with this stuff. Like so. Let's not mess with that too much. Alright, so I think that'll work. So we need to go to our game utils, we need to get our player state, and we also need to get our player state again. So the player state needs to be get stage stats, and we need get mission stats. Alright, so get stage stats, get mission stats. Do it that way. Yeah, it's kind of like when we did camera work to begin with a lot of it. And there's basically so many things that you can do for the camera that at some point you're just like, it's not going to work. Or the solution requires so much work to get right that at some point it's just like, okay, we're going to need a bigger boat sort of thing. We may not have a player proxy to get this information from. Alright, so we'll need to get current stats on here. We're basically going to need a get stage stats. And that'll need to be on our game instance, because it's not always going to be available. Our player state. So we need to store this information. Yeah, so it'll be get player state. Alright, so the other thing would be, yeah, it should be fine. We might want to set mission stats or something like that. Set stage stats. And actually have user stats. Fuck. We probably need this on the mission manager, not this guy. There's just tons of shit to do with this. Alright. One step at a time. Alright, user stats are what we need to call it. see, what time is it? Yeah, it's kind of part of the problem with this game is we don't have many people working on all this stuff. So if we run into problems with stuff like cameras and the rest, it's at at some point, as you know, I'm doing with other stuff, you have to stop building new systems and just be like, our limitation is this, and that's it, done. Like just oh, we can't run on top of rocks in our level. They're like, all right, no rocks in the level. Like kind of the thing with I know Adam's talked about we need water in the game and stuff like that, and I'm just like, we're not doing water. It's like, well, I really want it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're just not gonna have it. Like, but Brackenwood is almost entirely water, and be like, you know what? You make the fucking water. It's like, look around. Who's gonna implement that? If it's not me, it's nobody. And I'm telling you, it ain't getting done. So there you go. Player state. Get stage stats. All right. Yeah, we're gonna need basically a report stage stats, like a record stage stats function, which is gonna need to go on the mission manager. And then we're gonna need these like lists of user stats that are gonna be in here. I guess record stage stats. It's probably going to be the thing that we need. What is this complaining about? Can't find get local player state? Has to be called to get the local player state. Clear current mission. Yeah, let me. So I'll need to do these resets and everything else. We'll need to be able to get the current. That's a lot of fucking information we need. It's officially morning. You need to go to bed. Yeah, it is kind of 5 in the morning.